Welcome back, my friends, to Earthly Delights. Today, I'm glad to be here with you again in the garden, a place where the soil, the sun, and the quiet work of growing things always have something valuable to teach us. Now, take a moment and imagine the height of summer. The air is warm, the vines are full, and you reach into a thick curtain of green leaves to pull out a firm, crisp emerald cucumber. You break it open, and that clean, refreshing scent rises immediately. Few things in the garden taste more like summer than a cucumber picked at the right moment. But if we are being honest, cucumbers can also disappoint even careful gardeners. Many people plant them with high hopes, only to get 3 or 4 weak, yellowing fruits before the vine seems to give up completely. You watered it, you gave it food, you placed it in the sun. It produced once, then suddenly stopped. No new flowers, no fresh cucumbers, just a tired vine sitting in the heat, leaving you wondering where everything went wrong. If that sounds familiar, don't blame yourself too quickly. Your cucumber plant is not necessarily sick, and it does not mean you failed as a gardener. In many cases, the plant is simply following its natural biological program. Today, we are going to look closely at the soil, the growth habits, and the fruiting behavior of cucumbers. We will break down the 7 common mistakes that quietly reduce your harvest, and more importantly, how to fix each one in a practical way. Once you understand how the plant thinks, grows, flowers, and responds to stress, you can guide it toward a longer, stronger, more productive season. So let's get into it and turn those cucumber vines into a steady source of crisp, healthy harvests. Mistakes #1. The one-and-done planting fallacy. Let me start with a simple question. Why do so many gardeners treat cucumber planting like a one-time event? We go out in late spring, put our cucumber seeds or young plants into the ground, and then expect that single group of vines to keep producing all summer long. But cucumbers do not work that way. They are fast-growing plants, and they also tire out quickly. Once a seed sprouts in warm soil, the plant can begin setting fruit in just a little over a month. That speed is wonderful, but it also demands a lot from the plant. Cucumbers are not built to stay at peak production for 4 or 5 months without slowing down. By midsummer, the heat becomes stronger, pests like cucumber beetles often show up, disease pressure rises, and that once healthy vine begins to decline. So the first mistake is depending on only one planting. The better method is succession planting. Instead of putting all your hope into one planting in May, plant a fresh round of cucumber seeds every 4 to 6 weeks. This gives your garden a steady rotation of young, productive vines. When the first planting begins to struggle after 6 to 8 weeks of fruiting, the second planting is reaching its strongest stage, and the third round is already growing behind it. That is how you keep the harvest moving. You are not asking one tired plant to carry the whole season. You are building a rhythm, so when one crop slows down, another is ready to take over. Mistake #2. Water whiplash and the secret language of bitterness. Have you ever picked a homegrown cucumber, taken a big bite, and expected that cool, sweet crunch, only to taste a sharp bitterness instead? It is frustrating, especially when the fruit looks perfectly fine from the outside. But that bitterness usually has a reason. To understand it, we have to look at how cucumbers respond to stress. Cucumbers are made up of about 95% water, so steady moisture is not optional for them. When the plant receives a heavy soaking one day and then dries out badly for several hot days afterward, it goes into survival mode. This sudden swing from wet to dry creates stress in the vine. Under that kind of heat and drought pressure, the plant may increase bitter defensive compounds called cucurbitacins in the fruit. In nature, bitterness helps protect the plant from being eaten, but in our garden, it turns a fresh cucumber into something unpleasant. In many cases, we are the ones creating the problem by giving the plant water whiplash. The solution is simple but important. Steady moisture matters more than occasional heavy watering. Cucumbers generally need about 1 to 1.5 inches of water per week, applied slowly and deeply around the root zone. A soaker hose or drip line is one of the best ways to do this because it keeps moisture where the plant actually needs it. Then cover the soil with a 2 to 3 inch layer of organic mulch, such as straw or shredded leaves. Mulch keeps the soil cooler, protects those shallow roots, slows evaporation, and gives the plant a buffer during hot days. Keep the water consistent, and you greatly reduce the chance of bitter cucumbers. Mistake solved is 3. The sprawling jungle. Now let's talk about what happens when cucumber vines are left to grow wherever they want. Give them a little time, and they will crawl across the soil, twist around each other, and turn into a thick, tangled mat of leaves. That may look natural, but in a garden, it often creates problems. When cucumbers sprawl on the ground, the lower leaves sit in damp shade. Air cannot move well through the plant, and moisture stays trapped around the foliage. That is exactly the kind of environment where powdery mildew and downy mildew can spread quickly. The fruit also ends up lying on wet soil, where it is more likely to rot, become damaged, or develop blemishes. And perhaps the most annoying part is that ripe cucumbers hide under the thick leaves, so you miss them until they are oversized and past their best stage. The answer is to grow upward. Training cucumbers on a strong trellis, cattle panel, or A-frame completely changes the plant's growing environment. Air can move through the leaves, which helps lower disease pressure. The fruit hangs cleanly instead of sitting in damp soil. It also tends to grow straighter and is much easier to spot. Harvesting becomes faster, cleaner, and far less frustrating because you can see what the plant is producing before the cucumbers get too large. Mistakes Heart 4. Crowding the roots. Even when gardeners use a trellis, another common mistake is planting cucumbers too close together. I understand the temptation. Garden space is valuable, and it feels smart to squeeze in as many plants as possible. But with cucumbers, crowding usually reduces the harvest instead of increasing it. Cucumber roots can be misleading. The young plant may look small above the soil, but underneath, the roots spread wide and shallow through the top 12 to 18 inches of soil. They are constantly searching for moisture and nutrients. When plants are packed too tightly, they compete with each other for water, food, sunlight, and airflow. Instead of growing strong and balanced, each vine has to fight for what it needs. Crowding also creates a dense wall of leaves where air cannot circulate properly. Just like when vines sprawl on the ground, this trapped humidity invites fungal diseases such as powdery mildew. Once mildew gets established in a crowded cucumber planting, it can move through the crop fast and weaken the plants before they reach their full potential. Give vining cucumbers proper space, usually at least 12 to 18 inches apart along the trellis. And once the main vine is climbing well, do not be afraid to prune lightly. Remove crowded, shaded lower leaves and extra side growth where the plant is too dense. The goal is not to strip the vine bare, but to let sunlight and fresh air move through the canopy. When the plant has room to breathe and the roots have room to work, you get healthier vines and better cucumbers. Mistake/5. The nitrogen trap. Let me describe a situation many gardeners know too well. You walk into the garden and see a cucumber vine that looks impressive. The leaves are huge, dark green, and full of energy. The vine is spreading strongly, and at first glance, it seems like everything is going perfectly. But then you start looking closer, and there is one problem. No cucumbers, just leaf after leaf, vine after vine, and almost no fruit. So what went wrong? You did feed the plant, but you may have given it the wrong message. Many all-purpose fertilizers are high in nitrogen. Nitrogen is excellent for building leaves, stems, and fast green growth. Early in the season, that is useful because the plant needs a strong frame before it can carry a good crop. But once those bright yellow flowers begin to open, the plant needs to shift its energy. At that stage, it is no longer just building vines, it is trying to produce flowers and fruit. Flowers and cucumbers depend more on phosphorus and potassium. Potassium is especially important because it helps move water and sugars into the developing fruit. If you keep feeding a blooming cucumber plant with too much nitrogen, you are encouraging it to keep making leaves when what you really want is fruit. Once flowering begins, switch to a fertilizer where the second and third numbers are stronger, such as a 5-10-10 blend. You can also side dress with bone meal or use a liquid kelp feed to support flowering and fruit development. Give the plant the right fuel at the right stage, and you will see the vine move from leafy growth into real production. Mistake 6. The pollination puzzle. Have you ever seen your cucumber vine covered with yellow flowers? Felt excited about the harvest coming, and then watched those flowers dry up, fall off, and leave nothing behind? That can be one of the most confusing moments for a gardener. The key is understanding how many traditional cucumber varieties flower. Most of them are monoecious, which means the same plant produces separate male and female flowers. The male flowers usually appear first. They do not grow into cucumbers. Their job is to provide pollen and help attract pollinators. A little later, the female flowers begin to appear. You can recognize them because they have a tiny cucumber-shaped swelling right behind the flower. For that small fruit to grow, pollen has to move from a male flower to a female flower. Most of the time, bees do this work for us. But if the weather is too hot, too rainy, too windy, or if there are not enough pollinators in the garden, the process fails. When pollination does not happen, that tiny cucumber turns yellow, shrivels, and drops. You can solve this by hand-pollinating with a small paintbrush, moving pollen from the male flower to the female flower. But there is also a more reliable option. Choose cucumber seeds labeled parthenocarpic. These varieties are bred to produce fruit without needing pollination. Many of them produce mostly female flowers, and they can give you a strong harvest even when bee activity is low. Mistake 7-7. The trophy cucumber. Now we come to one of the most powerful lessons in growing cucumbers. This is the simple biological trick that many gardeners mistake for magic. A cucumber plant does not produce fruit for our salads. Its real goal is reproduction. It wants to make mature seeds. That is the mission driving the whole plant. When you leave a cucumber on the vine too long, letting it become oversized, fat, and pale yellow, the seeds inside begin to mature. Once those seeds reach that stage, the plant receives a signal that its job has been completed. It has reproduced. After that, the vine can slow down, reduce new flowers, and begin redirecting energy away from fresh fruit production. This is why even one hidden, overgrown cucumber can hurt your harvest. It can tell the plant that the season's work is done. The mistake is waiting too long to pick. The solution is to harvest early and often. Pick cucumbers when they are young, firm, crisp, and still at their best eating stage, often around 4 to 5 inches long depending on the variety. When you keep removing immature fruit, the plant never gets the message that reproduction is complete, so it keeps trying, pushing out more flowers and more cucumbers. The more consistently you harvest, the more the vine is encouraged to keep producing. Conclusion. And there you have it, my friends. These are the 7 common mistakes that can stand between you and a steady summer cucumber harvest, along with the practical fixes you can start using right away. We learned not to depend on one single planting, but to use succession planting, so new vines are always coming behind the older ones. We saw how consistent watering prevents bitterness, and why trellising keeps cucumbers out of the damp, crowded jungle at soil level. We talked about giving roots enough space, changing the plant's nutrition once flowering begins, and solving the pollination puzzle before it costs you a crop. Most importantly, we uncovered the power of harvesting early, so the plant keeps producing instead of thinking its job is finished. A garden often teaches the same lesson again and again. Steady care beats rushed effort. When we understand what a plant needs at each stage, and when we give the right support at the right time, the harvest usually follows. If today's walk through the cucumber patch helped you see your garden in a new way, gently tap that like button and subscribe to the Earthly Delights family. And share your story in the comments. Which of these 7 mistakes have you made before, and what will you change in your garden next? Until next time, keep your hands in the soil, keep learning from your plants, and may your harvests be full, healthy, and abundant. Take care, everyone.